that, hey, maybe we are starting to get to some people, and people are starting to understand the why that's the right way to do it. Abolition doesn't allow for exceptions. Okay, so again, you're going to see a lot of legislators, pro-life leaders that are going to say, well, we're against, abortion, but, maybe we'll leave room for this, that, and the other, right? Rape, incest are some of the main ones, but even the life of the mother, again, none of these we believe should be allowed, that there should not be an exception to murder. And I'm going to talk in my talk tomorrow about probably one of the hardest cases, and that's with ectopic pregnancies. But even in that instance, I would still say it's an exception. But I'll talk more about that tomorrow night. Abolition is immediate and not gradual or incremental. And again, that's a major one too. Again, going back to the slavery, the abolition of slavery, that's why they were abolitionists. They didn't want to compromise and regulate slavery. They just wanted to abolish it. They didn't want to gradually get rid of it. So we are against gradualism, incrementalism. Isaiah 10:1-2 says, "Woe to those who decree iniquitous decrees, and the writers who keep writing oppression, to turn aside the needy from justice, and to rob the poor of my people their right, that widows may be their spoil, and that they may make the fatherless their prey." So basically that just speaks of the idea of writing iniquitous decrees, right? We should not write iniquitous decrees. And unfortunately, with a lot of these regulatory laws with abortion, we believe as abolitionists that they are iniquitous decrees. They are unjust. They don't protect all the babies, not equal protection. And so we believe they're iniquitous decrees. I also found this verse in Ezekiel, which I thought was interesting, that I think could be applied here. But the word for pro-life establishment for their iniquitous legislation and regulation of abortion, Ezekiel 20:25, "I gave them over to worthless decrees and regulations that would not lead to life." And I thought that was quite interesting. There I could see a parallel to that principle, at least there. So some examples of some iniquitous kind of ideas that we are against gradualism, like things like the 20-week ban, pain-capable laws, heartbeat laws, dismemberment laws, waiting periods, parental consent laws, and many others like that. So again, in the pro-life movement, you're going to see support for all these things. Pretty much, they're going to support all these kinds of legislation, which on the outset may sound good. It's like, why wouldn't we want? But really, again, when you look at these things, it's basically telling you how, when to abort your baby. It's like, well, after 20, not after 20 weeks, or, as long as it's, before 20 weeks. Well, you're basically allowing, you're giving permission to abort babies that are a certain age, or if they have a heartbeat, they have a heartbeat, then they're, it's illegal, or it's, you're allowed to do that, but if there's no heartbeat, that kind of thing. So, we would be against all kinds of regulatory legislation like any of those examples there. Now, what we're not saying is abolition is not overnightism. So we're not saying that abolition is going to happen overnight. I mean, it may take time to abolish abortion in this state or in the nation, right? So that's not what we're saying, that it can happen immediately like that. But we're just saying, hey, we are just demanding it to be abolished, but it may take time to actually get that to happen. We just don't want to compromise on the way to doing that. And some incrementalism is just and some is unjust, right? So incrementalism by itself is not necessarily an evil thing, but unjust incrementalism is, again, like just giving certain laws that are going to allow certain abortions and not others, and then eventually taking away others. But an example of good incrementalism would be like, let's say the state of Texas abolished abortion. Well, and then maybe the next year that Oklahoma abolished abortion, and then the next year maybe California abolished abortion, probably not, but anyways, that's not an immoral thing. That's not a bad thing. Okay, this state did it. This state did it. So that, in a sense, that's incremental, but that's not an unjust, progression of increments. We are against unjust incrementalism. If that makes sense. Hopefully it does. All right. So those are the main points I was going to bring about. Some great resources here. Again, that pamphlet that I mentioned that you guys have. Again, read through that. If some of this is still kind of unclear, or you want more information, that pamphlet is great. peopleforequalprotection.com. I know Brenda's very familiar with it because I think she's part of that, right? Didn't you help with that? Help with this website? But I looked at it and it's got some great information. So write that down if you don't have it down. Peopleforequalprotection.com. It's got a bunch of great information on this whole concept that we're talking about tonight. So those are some great resources to learn more. All right, so that's pretty much all I was going to mention. But basically, I want to open up to any questions that you guys have here. And Brenda, you can come on up too. And anything that comes to mind. Don't be ashamed. Yes.
¿Tú hablas español?
No habla español. No sé. You can translate. Yeah. Anybody else speak Spanish here? You speak Spanish, don't you? Yeah. You can translate. Okay. Pastor Cody speaks Spanish. What? You okay about Taco Bell?
Would you consider anti-conception pills, abortion pills?
So basically pills to stop you from even conceiving, preventing like this conception. I would not, and then you can answer separately, I would not consider that an abortion because life starts when sperm and egg unite, right, at conception. So before that point, you don't have a human being. A lot of people think, it's life, the sperm. A sperm is alive, but it's not a human being, right? The sperm and egg have to unite to create a complete human. So if you're preventing, if you're doing something to prevent that from happening, well, I'll say this: it depends on what method you're using, right? It depends on what method you're using. But the concept is not necessarily an abortion, because if you're actually just stopping that from happening, then there's no life there. But the tricky part is, I think that there's some medications, the pill, other things, IUD, the ring. I mean, different things that women take, where their intent is to not get pregnant. But a lot of people would agree that those are what we call abortifacients, that they actually can cause abortions. Maybe not all the time, but at times they can. For example, the pill, right? A woman takes a pill not to get pregnant, and it may do that. It may prevent the conception. But we know that it doesn't always do that, because women get pregnant on the pill. So sometimes that mechanism doesn't work, and and there's been a lot of research done where people say that there's enough evidence to show that it alters those medications can alter the lining of the uterus, to where a fertilized egg will not be able to implant in the uterus because the lining of the uterus has been thinned. So I would say that things like the pill, like I said, the IUD, the Depo-Provera, the patch, can cause abortions. Maybe not all the time. We don't know how many times or how often, but most people that have studied that would agree that they probably do cause abortions at times. That's why I'm personally against those kind of methods, because it's kind of like playing Russian roulette. It's like you spin a bullet. It's like maybe it won't kill me this time, but maybe one time it will. You're taking a big risk of possibly killing a child. To me, that's pretty serious. So, but that's different than like barrier methods like prophylactics or things like that, where you're not using like hormones. There's no chemicals involved, you know. If that makes sense. Hopefully it does.
¿Entendiste más o menos? Depende del método. Algunas veces
That makes sense.
se daña a la mujer y termina buscando ya bebés. Depende del método.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that?
There's a good book called Taking Charge of Your Fertility: The Definitive Guide to Natural Pregnancy Achievement and Natural Birth Control, and it teaches about the fertility awareness method. So women can actually learn to chart their cycles and know exactly when you ovulate, and during that time you can use a barrier like a condom or something like that, so you're not always on a birth control. It's a really good book.
So like what we call like natural family planning.
Fertility awareness, you can like take your basal body temperature in the morning, because before you ovulate your temperature is low, and then after ovulate it goes up, so you can kind of see when you're ovulating, because it's not always like the second week of every month. Sometimes it's different, you know. So, and then also like checking your cervical fluid, and checking the position of your cervix. You can even do that. So it just kind of it empowers women to kind of like know, you know, when you're ovulating, and then you can, you know when to abstain or use a natural barrier.
Which basically, you know, those are ways that are not going to be like,
Chemical induced.
yeah, I mean, causing any kind of danger to a fertilized egg, which some of these other methods are, you know, that are not natural, you know, chemicals that you're putting, you know, pills or, you know, other patches and rings and stuff that are changing, you know, that are messing with your hormones basically, right? So yeah, those are ways that we would say are ethical.
It's called Taking Charge of Your Fertility, by Tony Weschler.
And if you want a good book on the pill, I think Randy Alcorn's book is really good. It's called Does Birth Control Cause Abortions? By Randy Alcorn. Yeah, that's a good one. Have you heard that one? You've heard of Randy Alcorn?
Yeah.
He's a very prolific writer, but he wrote a really good one called Does the Birth Control Pill Cause Abortions? He did a ton of research. It's really good. And I mean, it convinced me, you know, when I read it, it's like, yeah. So as you know, when I was a pastor and people, you know, I was like, I needed to know where I stood on that, because I would have, you know, people come up and say, well, what do you think, Pastor Phil? Do you think it's a, you know,
Plus it
and I counsel
as a woman.
Yeah, it does other. Yeah, so I mean, I counseled against it as well, and I couldn't say that it is always going to cause an abortion. You can't say that, but you can definitely say the dangers there, you know, potential danger, and the other effects that it could do. So, but yeah, that's a good question. Anything else? Any other question?
I have 3 questions, but I don't know if we're going to have time for them.
Yeah, probably.
So,
can you hear? All right.
So, okay, so the pro-life establishment, I'm assuming you're kind of using it like when we would say Black Lives Matter. It's tricky because we know that if you were just to make the statement, Black Lives Matter,
Right.
it's not attached to any organization.
Right.
You
Or-
say, yes, Black Lives Matter.
Or a set of beliefs, basically.
But if you're saying Black Lives Matter organization, you're like, well, I'm opposed to the organization Black Lives Matter. Is that correct? Kind of.
I think that's a pretty good analogy, but it's not just, it's what they stand for, you know. But yeah, of course, yeah, I think that's a good first, like, yeah, of course Black Lives Matter, because they're human beings.
Well, as you
created,
like a pro-life.
Right, exactly. And I think that's a fair example there. So, but the Black Lives Matter movement has, you know, a specific set of beliefs that, you know, people would be either opposed to or, you know, very specific kind of, but yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, so
Yeah.
my second question is just the idea of abolition beginning in the church versus universal abolition, more from the perspective of what can we, you know, and maybe this is, I don't know if you regard this as just incrementalism,
yeah.
like to say, we have to start in our homes. We have to start in our churches to make sure that the people that we're closest to and have influence with understand that we can abolish abortion in our homes and in our churches.
Yeah.
Because those are, regardless of laws or unjust laws or anything like that, we start.
Just the concept. You're
Yeah,
talking
the
about.
concept. Is that?
No, I have no problem with that because why not? I don't see anything immoral about, you have a sphere of influence, you're a parent, you have a family, you're in charge of a church, you're a pastor of a church, of course, and that technically could be, a part or an increment. It's like, I'm going to talk to my family about it. I'm going to see if I can, educate, whatever, like you said. But yeah, I have no problem. I don't know what she thinks, but I don't see an issue there. I think that would be just incrementalism. So yeah, that's kind of like going along. It's not overnightism. It's not like we're going to get everybody to change their view overnight. So it may take those steps.
Yeah, because
right?
I know a lot of statements tend to be broad, like we statements. Well, you can say we as a nation, but that may not define a lot of people. That we don't belong in the we. There, in the we the people.
Yeah.
So defining that.
Yeah, and which is again, if I didn't agree with that, I wouldn't be having this conference.
Yeah.
Because one of my reasons for having this conference year after year is to gradually get more abolitionists. There's nothing immoral about that. That's just you're not going to get everybody, right? So maybe 10 here, and this person here is not, and that's technically incremental steps. But yeah, that's not unjust incrementalism. And that's a good example of that. You want to add anything to that?
I think that church leaders do need to get involved too, because that, like the Black Robe Regiment, like in the early years of our founding, and they influenced the statesmen. It was the preachers in the day that went to the statesmen and rebuked them, like, hey, they're bad, and so like we need church leaders on board, and just starting with your congregation, but then also you'll see as people get on fire and want to be like, you lead by example, right? Like it's you as a pastor, right? And then they will follow, and then you'll see like that sphere of influence like outside your church too, and just like a ripple effect.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I'm glad you mentioned that, I'm very thankful for you being here and coming and listening and learning and any pastor. I mean, I'm just always thrilled when I see a pastor come to one of these because of that fact. It's like, man, you guys have a lot of responsibility and a lot of influence, and this is something that we're saying this is critical. That we're living in a Holocaust. It's not like it should be at up here in terms of our importance. Like we're living in Nazi Germany in the Holocaust. We need the pastors to be the ones that are like follow us, kind of thing. So we're living in a modern day Holocaust, right, with abortion, and like you said, I mean, even with slavery, there was a lot of the preachers that were leading the charge, and obviously, like he's like, well, as a pastor, you have other responsibilities. It's not like you can spend all your time, or even as a mother, right? You have your mother, your wife, a spouse, but at the same time, that was a very important part of their lives because they were in that situation. I think we're in that situation with abortion. So yeah, I think that's yeah. The one last one.
Yeah. So this has to do with the incrementalists, like you think that you may not be able to answer this. Some of them are coming from an angle that they're pragmatic. They believe that they can save some, right? And they don't believe they can save all.
Right.
So
you can respond too. But again, I'm against pragmatism.
Yeah. No.
And that's a distinctive.
So I'm trying to understand,
So what's the question? I guess maybe what's the question?
Yeah, like just once again, even if we're opposed to it, understanding from a political standpoint, do you think that the reason they're doing is not so much as they're pro-abortion? Do you think that in some cases they believe they can save some rather than say all, like if it's an all or nothing, but you end up getting nothing, is it,
They're
should
thinking.
we bemoan anybody that's trying to do something?
I'll let you answer. I'll answer.
Yeah.
On our website, people we use analogy of like an abortion. Okay, so what that whole idea of they believe it's good, like let's just prune the abortion leaf, right? But what happens when you start to prune the leaf? The roots go deeper, right? So by doing this, we're just saying let's just throw out constitutional law, which is the highest laws already, right? They're completely throwing out the only real roadmap to abolish abortion, and it's getting stronger. And that's why abortion is growing and growing and growing. That's why we say no incrementalism, because you're actually contributing to the problem in the long run. You know, and that's what equal protection gets you from the root, saying we're no exceptions, nothing, we're not regulating this, we're not compromised, because already the highest laws are on our side.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you
So
think
we
that
would
there are some that
bemoan it, I guess.
Well, I mean, they know that that's the case.
They're not ill-willed, they just don't know.
Yeah.
They're not, they don't.
Or maybe not all of them. There might be some that are. I mean, I'm not going to rule out that there's, that there's some. But yeah, I would.
I would say in the establishment, like those who've been in this, like for pro-life aid, those who've been leading the charge in pro-life organizations, they know very well that there's compromise, and they just can't support it. But those that just say I'm pro-life, and I don't really know what's going on, they're the ones that have good intentions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's, I guess, because that, I've been a couple times here, but sometimes it's like, do they really all have bad intentions? Are they?
No, I don't. No, definitely not.
We don't really care about babies. We don't really care about, it's like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm a politician, so I'm not as.
Did you figure out how to life?
Pro-life.
I think it's a combination. Like they want the votes, so we're gonna just put a fix on pro-life, that's all we care about.
There's a lot of
right?
people
But then
who say
also,
somebody.
I think there are just some that just.
There's those guys who are like, oh, it's ignorant.
There's ignorance of what the law is.
But it
And
is
then
it's a
pro-life
conflict plus,
establishments,
where it's the
pro-life
technology doesn't work.
organizations are
Right,
ruling
right.
the legislators. They're like, right? Don't criminalize the act of abortion, instead for women, they say, oh, 65%. They believe, like, so they feed into this, the lobbying, right? That's sort of never really
Thank you very much.
Yes.